standing before me was death.
There is a devil in this world, and I have met him.
All right, guys, this is a big one. This is one of my most anticipated films of the entire year, and I have finally seen the 2024 version of NOSFERATU. The original came out in 1922, which is over 100 years ago, which is crazy to think about. It is one of the oldest surviving horror films and still an absolute masterpiece in its own right. I know that a lot of people don't like to go back and watch silent films, which I understand, but in the case of NOSFERATU, especially if you like this new version, I would highly recommend it because this new adaptation is extremely faithful to the original silent film as well. But of course, it all dates back even further because NOSFERATU is technically an unofficial adaptation of Dracula. When they made the original back in 1922, they didn't have the rights to adapt the Dracula novel, but they did it anyway and changed the names of characters, changed the names of locations. They got in big trouble for it, but thankfully copies of the film survived and have existed to this day, to the point where now this is actually the second NOSFERATU remake, first one coming out in the 70s. So we are here in modern day with another take on the Dracula tale. And if you don't know me, not only am I a huge horror movie fan in general, I love vampire movies, and specifically, I love the Dracula character. I love so many different versions of this character, whether it's Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee. I even named my cat Dracula. So I am totally on board with more adaptations of the story. Yes, it is a timeless tale that if you've seen one Dracula version, you pretty much know most of the beats that this movie is going to hit. But the movie is not about throwing twists and turns at you. And yes, it does do things differently and it does have its own identity. But at the core of it, it's about how you tell the story and how you're able to immerse the audience into that world to tell a familiar story in a new way. And I think that if there was ever a crowning jewel example of how to do that, I would definitely point to this NOSFERATU as one of them. This is directed by Robert Eggers, who has basically made a name for himself doing very hyper visual style type movies, but all of them are very distinctly different. You've got The Witch, you've got The Lighthouse, you've got The Northman, and now you have NOSFERATU. And with each and every one of them, he really is able to take you and transport you back to the specific time period that it takes place during, whether it's the dialect of the characters, the set design, the cinematography. The one thing that I can praise about him above all else is that he knows how to use film as a visual medium. It's not just about the dialogue. It's not just about the performances, although they are great in this movie, but it's also about the way the camera moves, like the way that you see images within the shadow. And he understands the type of genre that he's working in with each and every one of these movies. And I think that NOSFERATU is definitely also going to be used as an example of how to do this to perfection, to immerse your audience within a specific time period. And at the same time, make it feel very natural, make it feel very organic. You don't really feel like the actors in this movie are necessarily trying too hard to fit in, because everything around them, the setting, the environment, the real practical locations, all of it kind of helps to lend to their performances because they really feel like they're there. Now, if for some reason you've never seen any adaptation of Dracula whatsoever and you don't know the premise, essentially our two main characters are lovers here. We have not Jonathan Harker, Thomas Hutter, and he is played by Nicholas Hoult, who does a phenomenal job, and his new wife Ellen, which is played by Lily Rose Depp. And specifically with the NOSFERATU style adaptation, there is this connection between her character and the vampire, and that she's having these visions of him. She's having these dreams of him. He's calling out to her. There's this seductive quality to it, this sort of darkness that lies within her. And in a time where, people are really trying to be pure and, there's sort of mysteries of the occult that are out there. There's gypsies doing weird rituals. There's things that are happening and you're trying to remain this pure person and pray to God and all of that. And yet she can't help but feel this sense of lust, this sense of desire. And her kind of savior or salvation away from that was her husband for some time. But of course, he is being called to meet with Count Orlock somewhere in order to sell him property in the town that the story takes place in, and, you know, the Dracula story unfolds from there. Now, I don't want to spoil too much. I'll talk a little bit about spoilers at the end of the video, and I will warn you before I get there, but essentially what I want to talk about is the portrayal of Count Orlock in this film, and why I loved it so much. And it's not just Bill Skarsgård's performance, which I will get to in a moment, but hang on. It is basically representing the presence of the evil that Count Orlock Dracula represents. I feel like a lot of times in films, in vampire movies, the vampires are very nerfed in terms of their power, their presence, what they can do. They're too gentle, they play it too safe. And what I love about Dracula, what I love about the original Nosferatu, as well as this version now in 2024, Count Orlock is not just a physical threat. I mean, yes, he does a lot of vampire shit in this movie, and there is no qualms about who or what he goes after. Like, there are some shots in this movie that I think will definitely make people uncomfortable. I don't think that it's like outright disturbing or anything. Like, I think this is a horror movie that's going to appeal to particular types of people, and other people it won't really work for, because there's not a lot of, you know, jump scares. There's not a lot of things that you would see in typical horror movies that come out nowadays. I feel like a lot of it is about the presence of the character and the reactions that other characters have to it. And you'll see like a specific, like, haunting image. Like, you'll see a shot of Count Orlock doing something horrific, and it's like it lingers on it for a moment, and then it sort of moves to something else, and you're sort of left with that image burned into your mind, but it doesn't stay there to the point where it's like over the top. It's just enough to show you that this thing is a monster. It is a creature. But along with that, it also is everything that Count Orlock brings with him, right? So as he travels, again, this is the Dracula story, so you know that this is going to happen. I don't mean this as a spoiler, but as he travels, you know, across the ocean to the town that this takes place in, he's bringing with him rats of the plague, right? Like, he's bringing darkness with him. Everybody that he encounters, they feel this sort of uncomfortability. He has a thrall, you know, he has a hypnotizing presence to him. Characters will be in a room with him, and they'll see him across at the other side of the table, and then all of a sudden he's right behind them. It's sort of like when you're in his presence, you become slightly disoriented, right? It's like he brings so much darkness, so much evil, so much resonance with just his mere presence, that it's not just like, oh, I need to like protect my neck because there's a vampire here. It's like you are bringing Satan himself with you. It's like this is evil incarnate. Like, people start to fall apart around him. The one character, you know, like the Renfield type character that goes insane and calls him his master and everything. Like, he's so devoted to him. He like worships the ground that he walks on. Whenever you have a character seeing him do something horrific, they basically like go mad, you know, immediately, just kind of seeing what this being can do. And it brings this shadow over the town. And not to be like super literal, but there's literally like a scene where, you know, Orlock holds out his hand, and you see this like artistic shot of this giant, I think it's in the trailer, you know, this giant shadow of a hand coming over the town. It's like Dracula, or Orlock, is infecting everybody. He's a poison, he's a plague, he's a sickness, you know, and that's the power of the vampire. That's the power of Count Orlock, and that's what I wanted to see in this movie that I just don't feel gets represented enough in vampire media. And I like all kinds of vampire media, you know, but I'm so tired of seeing them be so weak in comparison to, you know, what they're facing. To see a creature presented in this way, with this sort of like all-encompassing aura around him, that's what I craved in a Dracula story. That's what I craved in a Nosferatu remake, and this movie gave it to me. And so I'm very, very satisfied with that. Obviously, yes, it does recreate iconic shots from the original black and white version. You know, you see the shadow on the wall of him moving. There's scenes where he'll put like a shadow over someone's chest, and they'll like feel this darkness within him. They'll feel this cold chill. It's like, yes, this This is what I need to see. And before I talk about Bill Skarsgård's actual performance as Count Orlock, I'm going to talk about some of the other actors in this movie because all of them are great. The one actor, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy that plays the Renfield type character in this movie, I think he's going to be very underrated and underappreciated in terms of all the performances, because all the performances are so good, but I thought he was absolutely incredible, and he looked just like the disheveled, manic version of like the original black and white, silent film version of that character. He did such a good job recreating that I just was floored by his performance, and I think that probably a lot of people aren't going to talk about him because we have Willem Dafoe, Lily Rose Depp, and Bill Skarsgård, and all of those performances just, they take over the entire screen when they're there. We'll talk about Willem Dafoe first. This guy is, of course, somebody that believes in the occult. He's sort of like our Van Helsing type character. He believes in vampires and what could happen here, and that there's a sickness going across the town. And he is I loved his character in this movie because he has sort of like a cheery personality to him despite all of the crazy things that are happening. But it's almost as if he's driven mad in a different way. Like, he's not driven mad because of the vampire. It's just his own obsession of trying to take this creature down, which I really liked. Now, Lily Rose Depp, I think, is going to be the standout for most people here, probably because we haven't really seen her in a movie like this. Like I said, the only other thing I've seen her in is like Yoga Hosers and Tusk. Like, I've never seen her in a role like this, and she just goes for it. And maybe that won't work for some people. I could understand, like, I could see somebody coming out of this and thinking that she went over the top. But I personally think that it was perfectly in line with what was happening to her, because she's dealing with, this isolation, this loneliness, and also this kind of battle within herself about what kind of person she is and what kind of person she wants to be, along with having extended sequences where, essentially she's like a possessed person, like she is having visions and she's walking at night and she's dreaming of Count Orlock and everything. And there's like a whole sequence, I think when she first meets Willem Dafoe, there's like a whole sequence with those characters together, and she just goes nuts, man. And it just is so good. And I was thoroughly impressed with her performance because of that. All right, but now let's talk about the man himself, Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlock. So even talking about his performance at all may be considered a spoiler to some people. So before I really get into it, I guess what I'll say is that I think this movie is great, but it will not appeal to everybody. It's very much, it's dark, it's bleak, it's very heavy on the visuals. You get a lot of atmosphere in this film, and I think that that's what it's going for overall. It's kind of setting you into a mood, into a tone, and a lot of the horror. Although, like I said, there are some horrific images of Count Orlock doing some serious vampire shit, but a lot of the horror comes from the reactions that people are having and what the presence of this character is doing to the town. So the horror is kind of like this fear of the unknown. It's the fear of this evil. It's the fear of something supernatural. It's kind of that like a presence. It's a feeling. It's a mood that kind of lingers through the whole film. So it's not your like straight up in your face kind of horror. It's a little bit more of like letting you sink in and really kind of meditate on the horror. Again, I don't know if you count this as a spoiler because the entire marketing of this movie has kept him out of the trailers. So you don't see what he looks like. You don't see what his performance is. You don't know what he sounds like. And if you want that to be a surprise and you want that to be a mystery, I guess go ahead and click off the video now. But just getting into it. And I will be honest, when I first saw him on screen, I wasn't 100% sure I was going to vibe. But about 10 minutes into his performance, I got it. Like, I got it. It started working. And I thought it was phenomenal. So he does look very similar to the original Nosferatu, but they take liberties, and he's shot in heavy shadow for most of the film, so you only get kind of glimpses of him here and there. I think there's really only one sequence where you really, really get a good look at him, but the thing that they did with him, again, going along with the idea of this being a traditional vampire, which is, what is a vampire? It is somebody that is living beyond the grave, right? It is somebody that has died and has come back as this creature, right? So they really, even though he wears like a lot of clothing, like he wears this big kind of coat to kind of hide himself, you know, so basically not to be exposed to the world, but they make him look like a corpse. Like, they really do. Like, he's skinny, he's gray, he's got the fingernails, he's got the pointed ears, and he looks like a decrepit, like, zombie-like character, right? So the big choice that some people may or may not like is that, this may be a spoiler, I don't know what you consider a spoiler, but the big choice about his design is that they did give him a mustache. But Dracula, in the original novel, in the actual Bram Stoker novel, does have a mustache. So I understood if they were going for that sort of traditional, the original description of the character, it makes sense. It makes sense. And it worked for me. It wasn't too distracting. I thought it was fine at the end of the day. Like I said, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know. But then about 10 minutes in, it totally works. It totally works. It also makes sense for like the time period and the style of what he would look like when he died and all that. And if you're going with the whole Vlad the Impaler thing, they don't go that far in the movie. But I'm just saying in general, you know, images and paintings you've seen of him, that's the style of mustache that he has. So like, it makes sense to me. So it worked for me for that. There's also the way that he speaks. Now there's a lot of like vocal distortion kind of done to it. He speaks multiple different languages and he has like a very slow kind of drawn out style of speaking, as well as like a very old English dialect. But they did this one creative choice, and I don't know if this is the real reason why they did it, but this is my headcanon version, and this is why I loved it. So before he would speak, he would take these long, drawn-out breaths. Like, he would be like... And to me, the way that I thought about it was that, okay, if you were saying that he's a traditional vampire, he's a living corpse, that means that he doesn't breathe. Right? He doesn't need to breathe because he's a dead corpse walking around. So in order to speak, he would have to draw in air in order to be able to have like any kind of vocal tonation, right? So in my mind, I don't know if that's I have no idea. I have no idea if that's the reason why, but in my mind, the reason why he would take so many deep breaths is literally to pump his lungs up with air so that he could actually speak. I don't know. That's my headcanon. But anyways, his performance was absolutely incredible. I loved it. So yes, I'm going to go into spoilers now and talk about a few specific things. So if you don't want to know the nitty gritty details, leave the video now. So I'm going to get into spoilers. So I want to talk about a couple of specific things. I'm not going to talk about the whole plot, but just some things that stood out to me. But the first time you see him, like the first time he's in the movie is when, I keep calling him Jonathan Harker from Dracula, but whatever. When he gets to the castle, you know, he's got the big cloak on and everything. And there's like one shot where you see him like sucking the blood out of Nicholas Holt's character. And it is just like the creepiest thing you've ever seen. It's one of those haunting images I was talking about. But when you first see his entire body, he opens the coffin and Orlock is in there and he attempts to like hit him with I think it's an axe, and Orlock just catches it, right? Like out of a dead sleep, catches it, and he rises up and you see his dick on full display. I was trying to do that with a straight face. Yes, you do see Count Orlock's dick in this movie. So if that is a plus for you, and if that is something you want to see, yes. But no, actually it is such a scary sequence. He rises up out of this coffin. It's kind of similar to how the black and white Nosferatu, you know, when he's on the boat comes out, but he's just completely naked. And it is just this disgusting, like I said, like skinny, gray, decrepit corpse. And he's just like this lumbering, he's really tall too. Like he's got to be 6 foot something, almost 7 foot. Like, I don't know. He's really tall dude. And he's just standing up in this coffin, like lanky, looking over. And I am of the opinion that if you shoot nudity in the right way, it can be terrifying. One of my most burned in images in my mind that terrified me was that shot from Hereditary where you see all the naked people in the hallway. This shot of Orlock standing up, it kind of had a similar effect where I wasn't as scared of it as I was watching Hereditary, but looking at the image, it's so like not what you want to see that it works for the horror. And yeah, Lily Rose Depp's performance, she has these moments where it's almost like you're watching a scene out of The Exorcist, where she is just kind of haunted and plagued by these visions of Count Orlock that is coming to get her. And, you know, this sort of bizarre like sense of fear but also lust. Like obviously sexuality is a huge undertone in almost any type of vampire media, and it is no shortage of that here, especially with her reactions to a lot of this and what whatever she's compelled to do or feels like she needs to do or doesn't want to do, or something that is being restricted. There's a lot of shots of and talk of her like wearing like the corset, like that restriction of sexuality, and there's a whole big scene where she's ripping out of it and everything. And you see like a lot of that kind of stuff. There's a brief like little sex scene. You don't see like a lot of nudity. You do see Count Orlock's dick, and you see Lily Rose Depp naked a couple times, but it's all done in a way that I think works for the benefit of the story. Like it's all done in a way where you're exploring these themes of darkness and sexuality and love and lust, and her loving her husband, and then the lust of this vampire, and all of these things, and it all comes down to personal choice. Great stuff all around. Now the other thing I'll say for spoilers is, and this, I was a little bit shocked by this actually, that it really did follow the original very closely. I know that it's another adaptation of Dracula and it's a pretty straightforward story, but I was surprised they did the ending the same way. Or, it's different, but, it's more explicit in this version. But they ended it, the traditional way that Nosferatu ends, which I was a little bit surprised by. I thought with how serious and intense the movie was, I was thinking they were going to go in a different direction, but they actually made it work and they stuck the landing. So I got to give them props for that. Like I said, they do recreate images of like the shadow on the wall, but there's not, the thing about it is that it very much is its own movie. Like it doesn't copy from the original is what I'm saying. Like, because like I was happy when they did the shadow, right? It wasn't like in, Alien Romulus where they said, get away from her, you bitch, and it just didn't work for me whatsoever. I still like that movie a lot, but like that moment didn't work. But when they did like the shadow creeping on the wall, it was different. It was filmed in a different way. It wasn't the exact same shot. It was more of like a reference. And during the entire movie up until that point, they've been doing things with shadows the entire film. So it didn't feel out of place, right? So like that's a good way to do it. Ever since when Orlock is first introduced, you see him doing different types of manipulation with shadow. So it wasn't strange to see that shot of the shadow on the wall. It wasn't out of place whatsoever in this movie, so it worked. Anyways, guys, does the movie live up to the hype? Yes. Yes, it does for me. It does for me personally. This is absolutely the type of movie that I wanted to see. There were some choices in the movie that I wasn't sure of at first, but as it played out, I grew to love them, and I really can't think of any fault in this movie that brings it down for me. It just is great. It is great. It gave me the atmosphere that I wanted. It gave me an original, iconic performance of this character. The entire cast was amazing. Willem Dafoe was doing crazy Willem Dafoe shit. And more than anything, it gave me what I wanted from the character of Orlock, in just bringing that darkness and that plague and that haunting atmosphere with him. They didn't just treat him as a singular physical threat. They treated him like an abomination. They treated him like a plague, as if he should, as he should be. So that's what I appreciated the most about it. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the incredible visual styles of Robert Eggers and what he was able to bring to this. And yeah, so I highly recommend it. It will not be for everybody, but it absolutely worked for me. Definitely go check it out. Also watch the original 1922 version and watch the 70s version too. Why not? So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought of Nosferatu down below in the comments. Did it live up to the hype? Were you disappointed by it? Were there things you liked and disliked about it? If I had to, I'm trying to think of any dislike really. And I'm not trying to be like a fanboy or something, but I really can't think of anything right now that didn't work for me. I'm going to have to rewatch it and maybe I'll come up with some tiny little nitpick somewhere. But as of right now, I loved it. So I guess I'll have to think about it, maybe see it again, and then think about where it ranks for my favorite films of the year, because I'm not 100% sure yet, but it will be towards the top. So anyways, let me know what you think, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I would really appreciate it if you signed up to the Patreon or the channel memberships down below, as well as all the social media links where you can follow me. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see pictures of my cat, Dracula. So I don't know.